G'day, and welcome to the next video in the series on open source chess software. As with the last video, I've been having some trouble with my sound. Let's see if it's a little bit better today. The software we're looking at today is called Scoutfish, which is kind of a derivative of Stockfish. It's not a machine engine, but it is a very powerful searching tool for finding games according to different criteria. So what we're going to do, the usual routine, we're going to quickly demonstrate how to download it. And I mean, of course, you can always download source, the executable, download the source and compile it just to sort of see how the whole thing fits together. And then I spent a little bit of time today actually looking at how you might use the software, because I found it's very useful. Okay, so let's just go across to the computer here. Now it's called Scoutfish. It's on GitHub. You can see that's the GitHub there. Marco Costalba. He's the designer of the software. It's called Scoutfish, and as I say, we'll just do the normal process here. We copy the link up the top there, and I'll go on to a. What I've decided to do is I'll actually download this on my main machine. You can download a Git Git repository as many times as you want, as long as in different directories. So I'll do git clone, and then I've just pasted, and you can see it's relatively small and it's copied there. Do listing of the directory, you can see it's created Scoutfish, we're down there. Two directories, we're going to go into SRC in a minute, but it's also downloaded PGN. You look at what's in PGN, number of games there. The most interesting file there is a famous games, which actually it uses later to sort of test whether the software you've downloaded is working okay. So anyway, let's go into SRC. You can see all the code there, and I say some of these files are kind of lifted from Stockfish. And what Scoutfish effectively does is it indexes all the games according to certain indexing rules, and then you can search a number of different powerful ways, which we'll go over quite briefly as well. Now, so as usual, you do make. If you just type make in by itself, it doesn't tell you very much. If you look at that line just above there, it says make build arch. So make build, which means the build version, and we're going to assume that you've got a 64-bit CPU, and I think our GCC here, you can also compile it with Clang, which is the other main compiler out there. So you see that'll take maybe about a minute to compile. It's compiling all the C code. There's a few warnings in the compilation as we've seen in the past, but none of them are terminal. So it builds the source code, and we can move on. What is also, which I forgot, let's finish talking, that's fine. So let's have a look. And then you can do /Scoutfish because you're in that directory. And it kind of has a UCI thing. So you can put is ready in, but once again, Scoutfish, like Stockfish, is not a program you'd typically be running at the command line. Now, so what they have also provided you with is some Python wrappers, which is basically the way you run it. So let's have a look at Python 3. We'll just run test.py, and actually goes through and it reckons software's working fine. Let's have a look at what is in the test.py, and you can see it's basically it imports a number of packages it needs, JSON, system. And then it imports Scoutfish, which is a Python wrapper they've included for you. You can see it's scoutfish.py in the same directory. And then what Scoutfish does is it runs, and then it starts querying different searches, right? So he's searching on Fen, yeah, and then it comes back and it tells you what the response was. It found 500 games, and gives you the responses. So. Just have a quick look, just going through this quickly, just to give you an idea of how it all works. You can see this scoutfish.py. If you write your own little scripts, that's the one you import. Now, having run that, just go back to the PGN, lspgn. You can see now it's created this famous games.scout. So what it does when you run it on a PGN file the first time is it creates this index file, which is why it can search for things very quickly. Now, I think before I continue, we'll just have a quick look at what it can search for. As I said, you can search for fens, or they're calling them sub-fens, and obviously it just searches the game and tries to find if that position was in the game at any point in the game. You can search for results. You can search for moves. Sequences require one condition to be met, then another condition to be met. And then I think it's also material balance. So there's quite a few things you can search on. So it's very similar to what you might find in any of the GUIs may have a similar search function. But because this one's automated and can search for certain other things, moves and captures, you can just code it up. Like you can see this is JSON. You just instruct it in sort of simple JSON lines, and you can do the search. So what I'll do now is I've downloaded it there, and you can see how to download it and run it. I'll now go back to my main system, mytest.py would be better. So if you understand Python or not, it's fairly straightforward. You import Scoutfish, and then how many threads you want your CPU to run with. Now, I've downloaded the Caser database, which obviously a much later database, chess database, like millions of games in it, so you can search for things more effectively. And then what I've also done, I'll highlight it when I run it, is that I didn't find, there probably is a way to search for the player names in Scoutfish, but what I've done is I've done a search for, if you go down here, I've searched for any games which are king, king and pawn, or king, pawn, white pawn, black as a king and pawn, or white as a king and pawn, black as a king. So find all those games and then list them out, right? So this is sort of what you can try. What you'd actually do is this variable q, you could obviously put more and more parameters in there to search for things like a bit more diligently, if you want to search for queen sacrifices or certain positions and so on. Now, the reason why I'm searching for those king and pawn endgames is I'm obviously doing the corresponding squares series as well, and I was just trying to find if there are any interesting king pawn endgames. So having done that, you then run it. Let's have a look at the output. If you just search for those types of endgames, there's actually 34,000 games in the database, right? And I decided it'd actually be a bit better to filter those. So what I did, I put together a list of top players, and then both white and black had to be one of those top players. Now, this is straight from the Chessmetrics website. I've taken players with the 5-year peaks, players with the strongest 5-year peaks. So I've added Carlson in there because I think Chessmetrics, the data is still there, but it's not really being updated. But Kasparov, Lasker, Capablanca, Botvinnik, Fischer, Karpov, blah, 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 and so on. It goes out to about number 30. I'll probably increase that list a little bit. So then there's 34,000 games, and you filter on those names, and you end up with about these 10 games. And obviously what I then did is I looked at the Maroczy-Marshall and the Lasker-Tarrasch games, and it's very, very funny when you do a bit of searching, you can find really interesting things which have happened in games in the past. I'm sure people are aware of them, but it's kind of amusing and very interesting to sort of search for something. You find some games, and the games are quite unusual. So given that, I've already loaded those games up into. There's 15 games there, and let's look at this one: Maroczy versus Frank Marshall. Now the key here is obviously I searched it for endgames, and here's an endgame. This is quite funny. We're going to go backwards, actually. You can see this at the very end. They played out to the very, very bitter end, and this position was lost, right? We'll go now forward. So the problem for white is that black has the opposition in this position, and black wins. Okay. Now, what I want to do though is go back to. I just quickly went through with the engine. And you've got this position here, which it's dead drawn, right? Now, what white should have done is he should have played king c2. Now, in this position, I'll just continue with the typical game continuation. Black can still break through on the king side, but by creating a pass b pawn, white has enough counterplay. So you can see the white knight will continue to harass the black king, and the black knight, I think white should play b5. The black knight will be forced to hold the white pawn like that. So that knight is now out of action, and then all white really needs to do, there's various tactics. He's won one of the pawns, and now white's just going to park his king in front of the pawns and use the knight to harass the black king, and you end up with this sort of position, which is kind of drawn, right? So it's interesting from this, go back to the original position. White could have held, right? But what Maroczy played was a mistake. Now, there's a tactic here. Just have a quick look, see if you can see the tactic, which is what Marshall played. He took the b pawn. The computer line is actually not even to take back, so knight takes b3, takes back. Obviously, we have this fork, c4 check. Right, so what's different about this position is that the knights are off the board. Black is a pawn up. There's obviously pawn race elements in this position, but the reality is that black will win those races. So first of all, black can threaten to push the d pawn through, which would beat the a pawn. So having now deflected the king a little bit, black now goes for the g pawn, which is picked up. Now the problem is that the white kings has been forced to back rank, so that in this upcoming pawn race, black will queen with check, as we can see. So white decided to preempt, and unfortunately for white, there's too many pawns. Has a queen. White has a queen now, but okay, the first thing, which I'm sure there's different ways of winning. First thing Marshall did was exchange queens, knowing that this endgame, which we looked at before, is winning for black. So that was quite interesting, right? Just a fairly random king and pawn endgame. And actually, there was a very interesting tactic early on in that game. And you know, lightning does strike twice. Let's have a look at this game, which is the one between Lasker and Tarrasch. It's 1914 St. Petersburg. I think it's the preliminary, not the final rounds. And this is a few years after Lasker has defeated Tarrasch in the World Championship match. I've already covered that in another video. But I found this very interesting too. So let's have a look at this position. So the ending position is very wild. We'll go backwards from the end just to show you what I mean. It was like this is a very weird position, right? And the game ended in a draw because there were a couple moves. There were a few pawns over here. Black picked up the H pawn. The white king raced over, and black was just in time to pick up the two white B pawns. Anyway, so let's have a look at this position here, which there's only one drawing move here, by the way. White should play king f7. Let's just see what goes on if king f7 gets played, just to see what the differences are. King f7. Now, if black takes the f-pawn, which is the logical thing to do, white takes the bishop back, but then is also able to pick up the g-pawn. You know, bishop's on or bishop's not on, doesn't really matter. That this will end up being a draw, similar to the line which we saw in the actual game, right? However, what white did was he took the g pawn, which is actually losing. What happens is bishop takes f5 check. The king is forced somewhere. Now, it's wicked confusing. Black played bishop takes g7, and basically we transposed into that line we saw earlier. What black should have played is bishop e6 check, and this is completely different. So now it doesn't really matter where the king goes. Just pick up the black squared bishop on g7. Now, the difference in this position is now the b3 pawn falls, and this is a winning endgame for black. We'll just sort of continue based on computer lines, block the h-pawn for a moment, and then really it's just pushing these pawns. The problem is the white king is just in completely the wrong position, right? Has to spend, you know, all those moves getting back to the green side, but it's just too late, right? So it's quite funny. So there we go. So I mean, this video was originally about Scoutfish, which I showed you how to download it and given you sort of a simple idea of how it is able to search very big databases very quickly for positions or openings or whatever, or fens, whatever you want to look for. And I found some king and pawn end games, and then I loaded up a couple of famous games, and there was very, very funny errors in both of them. So I hope you found that overview of Scoutfish interesting. You should definitely download it and play around with it. And thanks for listening.